So Naomi Shahib Nye wrote this poem, The Art of Disappearing. When they say, "Don't I know you?" say no. When they invite you, oh, she's listening. What? That's marvelous. When they invite you to the party, remember what parties are like before you answer. Someone telling you in a loud voice how they once wrote a poem. Greasy sausage balls on a paper plate. When they say, "Let's get together," say, "Why?" It's not that you don't love them anymore. You are trying to remember something too important to forget. It's not that you don't love them anymore. You are trying to remember something too important to forget. Trees. The monastery bell at twilight. I'll remember the next line. Just give me a second. What? Oh, yeah, I was. Oh, that's great. Oh, it's the one on the bulletin. Right? Yeah. So, when someone notices you in the grocery store, nod briefly and become a cabbage. Tell them you've started a new project. It'll never be finished. When someone you haven't seen for years appears at your door, don't go singing them all your new songs. You'll never catch up. Walk around feeling like a leaf. Know you could tumble any moment. Then decide what to do with your time. At the beginning of our text today, it says that the time is coming for Jesus to be lifted up. And he sets his face resolutely toward Jerusalem. We're not quite halfway through the book. And up to now, it's been, for the disciples, quite a party. They jump onto Jesus' wagon and they go with him to healings and exorcisms. And he speaks in several synagogues. The crowds grow. At one point, even 5,000 people show up to hear him speak. What preacher wouldn't like that, huh? Trustees would be very happy. And at that same time, whoa, his glasses broke. No. And at the same time, there isn't enough food to eat, and Jesus somehow produces something out of nothing, and there's this big party that they all have together. You know the story. It's been great for the disciples, you know. They've been the ones who've been telling others that once they wrote a poem, you know, and they liked the greasy sausage balls on the paper plate. Well, it wasn't quite that way. But they did argue about who would be greatest and sit on the right and left hand side of Jesus when he comes into his kingdom. So they're feeling it's quite the whole party thing that's happening. And then Jesus turns and sets his face resolutely toward Jerusalem. There's been a subplot going on in Luke since chapter 4. Many of you know about it. That is that the religious professionals out in the towns and villages, the scribes and the Pharisees, and in Jerusalem, the temple priests, have been conspiring against Jesus to trap him in some way that he might give a blasphemous answer to a question which would allow them to be able to throw him in prison or maybe even execute him. And that subplot becomes the main plot, and by chapter 22, it comes into fruition, and Jesus is betrayed and crucified. So here in chapter 9, he is turning his face toward that. He has already told the disciples that he is going to suffer and die. They know, but they don't get it. They're like, woo, more sausage balls. Yes, it's a great party, as they move on. Next in the text, they're going through Samaria to get to Jerusalem. And they come to a village, and the village rejects them. Why? Well, it says because he had his face set resolutely toward Jerusalem. But why? Maybe because they're adhering to the tribal loyalties of Samaria and Israel, Samaritans and Jews, and they are to be opposed to one another. And if you're going to go to Jerusalem to be worshiping at the temple there, then you're not one of us, because we worship at the temple on Mount Gerizim. That's where Samaritans have their temple. So maybe that's the reason they reject him, tribal loyalties. Or maybe it's like when he went to the synagogue in his hometown in Nazareth, and they were so happy that he had come there because they were hoping that he would cater to their needs, that he'd be their boy, that he'd get done what they wanted to get done for their sake. And maybe that's what the folks in the Samaritan village were thinking. We don't know, but at any rate, they reject him. And when they reject him, he just moves on to the next village. He doesn't do anything. But his disciples turn to him and say, Jesus, would you like us to bring down fire from heaven and burn that village? It's a little thing that Elijah did back in 2 Kings. He brought rain down fire from heaven, and so there's precedent for it. And they, of course, don't get what's going on with Jesus. They are too involved with the party. They don't understand what the trees and the monastery bell at twilight are. So Jesus rebukes them, and he just moves on. They, of course, were responding out of a commitment to the honor-shame culture of their day, which says if somebody shames you or rejects you in some way, then your job is to retaliate. That it cannot be, you cannot tolerate anyone else rejecting you because it looks bad. It makes you look as if you were weak, and you can't afford to look weak, so you have to destroy the opposition. So there are two different social mores that Jesus is violating here, one with the Samaritans and one with his own disciples. And then there are three people who come up and say they want to follow him. Jesus, I'd like to follow you. I'd like to. Could I? Jesus says, well, foxes have holes and birds have nests, but the Son of Man doesn't have any place to lay his head. It seems like it would be so comforting to follow this healer, right? This amazing person who is attracting so many people, to be close to them. This could provide comfort for me. And Jesus is saying this isn't about your comfort. It's a matter of priorities, which you see with the next two people that come. The next fellow that comes says, I want to follow you, please, please. Oh, wait. First, I have to go bury my father. Well, this is a religious responsibility. It's a religious moray in the ancient world. But it is secondary. It's a matter of priority, you see. Religious mores are secondary to the trees and to the bell in the monastery at twilight. And the next one says, I want to follow. Yes, could I follow? But I'd like to go say goodbye to my family first. And this is yet another law, more in the ancient world, loyalty to your tribe. Your tribe is primal. It is the first loyalty. But first. And Jesus is saying, there's something you are trying to remember that is too important to forget. So, here's the struggle in preaching this text, right? Jesus is setting his face toward Jerusalem, and we all know what's going to happen there. We know the story. He's going to be crucified. He's going to die. And so when you preach a text like this, I'm always, here's folks, myself included, we're all trying to be, faithful people in our lives. And, does this mean that we have to go somewhere and be crucified? So the danger is in making it sound heroic. I'm going to stand up and do this marvelous thing. Jerusalem, Jerusalem. It sounds like this. But this is not the tenor of this text at all. The tenor of this text is a simple prioritizing to the disciples, to the Samaritans, and to the three people that come to say they want to follow him. So I made a decision. I'm not going to tell you some great heroic story about somebody, which is a hard thing for me. If you'd pass those back. How are we doing over here? Because the Gospel of Luke spends an inordinate amount of time telling us what the trees in the monastery bell are. And it can't just be encapsulated. So I thought we would read it together. How are we doing over on this side? Still coming there? I could have put this in your bulletin, but then you would have read the poem ahead of time, and you would have been reading it while I was reciting it. And then it wouldn't have worked. So, now I need one. Oh, there we go. Thank you, sir. And now let me put my glasses on. Oh, my goodness. Okay. This is a summary of what the Gospel of Luke says that it means to follow Jesus. Oh, my goodness. When it goes bad, it goes bad. So I'm going to ask you guys to read "for the sake of" and "after" and the line that comes after that. To follow Jesus means to forego the sovereignty of all tribal identities, family, political party, nation, race, and religion, for the sake of. To follow Jesus means to forego judgment of others for any reason: behavior, life situations, sexual orientation, differing beliefs. The forgiveness, understanding, and acceptance found in God's love. To follow Jesus means to forego worries over ordinary security, money, safety, food, for the sake of trust in God's provision and the abundance of creation. To follow Jesus means to forego the spirit of ownership, the conviction that something is yours because you alone earned it, for the sake of the spirit of gratitude to God for the gift of life and all it includes. So you see the kinds of priorities. Take it home, put it on your refrigerator, refer to it before you eat at night. I had a confirmation class a long time ago in which I had a particular lesson that was entitled Jesus, the Radical Revolutionary. And we went through it and we looked at all the ways that Jesus violated the mores of his day. You know, he talked to the woman at the well. He healed a Roman soldier's daughter. He let a woman anoint his feet with oil. He turned over the tables in the temple because they were cheating the poor people who were coming on pilgrimage to the temple, and they were overcharging for the sacrifices because it was an opportunity to make some good money. When we were done with this whole thing, I'd given different groups, in the class, different texts to look at. And then they came back and reported what Jesus had done. One young fellow said, Denny, I thought that to be a Christian meant to be a nice person. This doesn't sound very nice. I said, yeah, that's the thing. To follow Jesus doesn't mean that you're a mean person. But it does mean that there is something that is more important than all the social mores that we call nice. So when you think about what this might mean, think about the times that you've stood in the grocery store chatting with somebody and it's kind of eased its way into gossip. Or think about the party that you've been to when people were quite upset because of the traffic barricade that was set up by Black Lives Matter down in Hartford, and it made it inconvenient for many people to get home on time for their supper. Think about the next time you hear someone tell an ethnic joke. Think about the next time that you hear anybody being scapegoated for something. Those are situations. Foxes have holes and birds have nests. But there's no place to hide for people who follow the Son of Man in situations like that. You have to step up. walk around feeling like a leaf. No, you could tumble any second and then decide to follow Jesus.